Durham Cathedral is one of the most important Romanesque buildings that we have in the country.
Well, obviously the cathedral is the reason that Durham is here. It's been the focus of the community in Durham ever since it was built.
The scale of Durham as well is absolutely enormous and hugely ambitious. It was the vision of Bishop St-Calais in 1093 and took about 40 years to get to a completed state.
When this was a monastic cathedral, all the walls would have been painted. The tomb behind me gives an idea of how the whole cathedral must have looked.
We've spent a lot of time over the past 5+ years working with the masonry team, for example, to build up their skills, their lime repair skills, their masonry skills, so that the work that they can do is at the highest standard.
Very few cathedrals in England still retain their own workforce, but I think it's vitally important because you build up a knowledge of the building, you build up a knowledge of its weaknesses and its strengths. So it's much easier for you to actually judge when you see a defect, how quickly you need to act. You have the skills locally, so you know the local stone, you know how to work it, you know how it's going to weather. So I think it is vitally important that we keep the own workforce in the cathedral going, and we have the memory of the place as well. We have people here who've been here over 35 years.
In the last 200 years, we've had relationships with the university in that we founded the university along with the Bishop of Durham. So we've been at the heart of the university's life as well as the wider community.
Every student that comes to Durham University starts their life here at the cathedral through a matriculation ceremony. We welcome them as they arrive and we say goodbye to them as they leave. So it's quite a deep connection. I think you can often convince yourself that somewhere like this, that does have such a long history, is almost unchanged and has always been as you see it today. And of course it hasn't. And somewhere like this has been through so many different changes, and you don't want to preserve it in aspect. It's a living, breathing building, and the people that visit and the people that are the custodians of it for whatever period of time, I think have to put their own mark on it.
Art has always played a part in the life of the cathedral as a focus for prayer, as a way of telling the Christian story for people, particularly in the Middle Ages, who couldn't read. So I think we see art as a way of expressing the faith, drawing people closer to God, and letting the art be art in its own right and speaking to people in its own way.
It isn't often that you will get the opportunity, if ever you get the opportunity as a glass artist, to make a piece of work that will go into a building that will outlive you and will be there for hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. That is really quite some pressure, but it's also really, really thrilling as an artist. I hope to be able to give something to the building which will become important, both for the visitors, but also because it's in memorial to a very special lady called Sarah Pilkington. The brief sets out a theological side to the concept. It sets out a creative side to the work, but it also is about a young, vibrant person who was here one day and not here the next. And that is a very, very strong story. And it's a story that runs like a thread through my designs necessarily. The designs are about the journey of learning, because the window is there to form a link between Durham Cathedral and Durham University. But there is not a day I work on this piece of work that I don't think about Sarah. When I'm working on the glass, I'm actually creating the design and the composition from hand-applied colour. And this frees me up in a way that you can't work when you're working with a leaded design. The leaded design is very much a confined structure, and it's also the most wonderful thing about stained glass, that those rules and that confined structure. Well, the window that I'm making is not a confined piece, it's an intuitive piece of art. There is a very spiritual side to what is happening, and I think when you make a piece of work with your own hands, that cannot but help be passed through your hands into the materials. At the very first stages, one of the traditional techniques that I used is acid etching. And acid etching, although it's a traditional technique, can actually be used in a very contemporary way. It's a beautiful process, but it's a process that's worked in reverse. So you are starting with a solid layer of colour, and as you work with the acid, you're taking that colour away. It's very direct. Once the colour is gone, it's gone. So you cannot go back and recreate it. It has to be, you know, a complete one-off. And I have actually worked in a very sort of amorphous, free way with the acid. So I am almost painting with it. And this effect, right at the beginning, really, really sets the whole tone for the window. In terms of designing for architectural glass, traditionally, the working drawing, that's the full-size drawing, is called cartoon. We borrowed a church that was big enough with a gallery that we could actually lay out the whole of the cartoon for the window. And I was very pleased to receive a group from Durham as well as the Pilkingtons. And they then actually saw the window that would really actually be made, not just the scale design, and that was really quite some moment. I want the work that I make to reflect and be integral to the architecture it bonds with. This is very important to me. So I've worked very hard within my composition and my massing within the design and the scale of the various elements in the design to try and draw the architecture and the glasswork together. I usually make abstract or semi-abstract pieces of work, but because this is a very spiritual piece, it's really important that it can be read, because stained glass throughout hundreds of years has been something that you can read like a book. So all of that background information had to be there, tied together within the design, and it's important that the artwork flows right from the beginning, right from that point. That's what you carry with you in your mind and in your heart as you go forward from a design through the various other technical drawing processes and drafting processes to the actual materials themselves. And it's that process of building on each stage and each process that gives you the entire piece of work that you eventually see. The important thing for me, being a designer maker, that there was no disconnect between my concept and my ideas, the way I wanted to make that work, and then the work that I am actually making.
I think with a place like this that's stood here for 1,000 years almost, it's important that each generation puts its own mark on it.
We had long discussions about what to name the window once Mel had presented her design, and we settled on the name Illumination Window because that drew together all the theological themes in it, along with the wishes of the donors as to remember Sarah and to express the link with the university. So illumination obviously has the theme of light, which is such a strong Christian theme, but it also brings in wisdom, learning, growth, maturity. So to see that illustrated artistically, I think will open up ideas around the theme of illumination for people who will bring their own thoughts and understandings to it.
Actually, now that I arrive, I'm readdressing the feelings I first had when I designed the window, because I'm getting the true sense again of the actual scales. There are 64 plates, I call them rectangular plates in the main lights here. And now together they form a window that will be part of this fabulous building and take its place amongst all the other windows that are here. I'm very much hoping that the vibrancy of colour and the rhythm in the window and the way that the colours transition throughout the window and really the uplifting feeling of a white structure throughout all of the panels will be something that when the scaffolding comes down and you see it as a complete piece of work within the fabric of the building will really continue to send a message about Sarah and the vibrancy of a young woman and the vibrancy of a student, and that life is very precious. And that's, I think, a message that can go on for a very, very long time.